Okay, fun with compositions. We did a previous video, what do they call it, back to basics, or just compositions, whatnot. Fundamentals are what these are about. Let's get some more of these started, okay? And let's just talk about, let's kind of ingrain the basic principle in terms of the process, okay? All right, now I have this one stamp right here called the Seaside Cove Sm. It's a very small version. I wouldn't be surprised if the larger sibling, I used to think it was probably the largest kind of craft rubber stamp out there in the market. I think it's, what is it? It's about 4 inches tall and about 10 inches wide or so, roughly about. Okay, it's huge. I have a video just dedicated to that design, but this is the smaller sibling one, and what I'm doing is I'm establishing kind of a foundation for the other images to come, okay? So, big stamp, even if it's a small one, plenty of pressure on all sides, left, middle, and right, top and bottom, okay? All right. So we've got that established. Okay, now stamping something like that is no different than stamping out a foundation like this curvilinear road, okay? I put a foundation down for my main subject matter, all right? Now, I didn't have to do this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use nature set number 11 here, okay? And it has these palms and huts right here, this Palm Island stamp. There's a sun, birds, some fronds in the that you can use in the foreground and whatnot. These could have just been stamped into a field here, and that could have been colored in with different colors, inks, whatever you're going to be using, pastels, okay? This right here, of course, just gives all these other stamps a nice platform to stamp on, okay? So, once again, we can have our foundation right there. And as far as this palm, let me show you what this looks like inked of. Of course, it'll be stamped that way, so the opposite, but that's what that image looks like right here, okay? You can stamp it wherever you want. You can stamp it in the middle here. You can stamp it on the, the right or left. Whatever I do, I'm going to kind of overlap down into this image a little bit, okay? No masking necessary. Definitely not needed. Maybe not even desired, because it might just kind of get in the way these images have been designed to be used. They just go right down there, so the overlap was probably about 1/8 of an inch, maybe even more than that, 1/4 inch. Nah, I don't know about 1/4 inch. You just don't want to take this down so far that this horizon line right there, that darker thing, would be going right through the huts, okay? So there's plenty of leeway right in there. Lot of tolerance, okay? So don't worry about a really careful placement of it, okay? There's a range. You don't have to be exact, okay? Now, I could just leave that as is. I could put a sailboat over here or something like that, or there could be a sun right in here, maybe a nice, beautiful sunset over the water. Or, you can go with other types of imagery. It's whatever you want to do. I'm not going to use this whole one right here, but since this comes in that nature set anyway, let's just put this in here. Now, I talked about it in my previous video. I talked about if you want to, utilize different colors in here, like green fronds or something like that, you can color that in with black and put, a little bit of green touches in there if you want to. I'm just going for the compositional element of it right now, so I'm not going to worry about coloring these images on here. Same thing that goes in the water. If I don't want to make that so stark in contrast, I could have just stamped out some of this in blues or whatnot, in my rocks a little bit, so that the impression itself is inherently, it has color in it, okay? But let's just talk about the fundamentals here, okay? We have that going on here. One of the things I like to do, if I have it, is I'd like to bring in some extra textures. I saw that stamp here somewhere. Here's kind of a larger version of it. I'll use that one. For just bare rubber stamps. I'm using both cling foam versions of stamps in my sets here, but the bare rubber is just used with the acrylic blocks with some tack and peel applied to it. Alright, so this is some extra rock textures right here, okay? Something like that. It gives it a nice texture though, doesn't it? And it looks like it's a little bit more incorporated in with the scene. Don't have to put it there, but if you have them, you can employ some extra textures for whatever needs you might want. And let's put some foreground in here, okay? One of the things I like to do is kind of as a framing device, I like to have some overhanging limbs, and it kind of gives your foreground something in common with the background. So when you have kind of a repetition of form or imagery, okay, so these are some palm fronds that are closer to us. They represent something like a tree right here in the foreground, but it's kind of overhanging into the scene, okay? It doesn't mean that it's floating up in the air or anything like that. We just don't see the, you know, the trunk of the tree, the stalk. But you can have this kind of coming in like so. They would stand out a lot stronger if you made that background, those background trees lighter, like say green or something like that, and you made these ones in the foreground, maybe a black or darker green. But anyways, you get something like that going, okay? And it acts as a nice framing device. So in terms of kind of a unification of form, doing things like that is a good way to go. And as far as composition goes, it kind of contains everything really nicely. So you have smaller palm trees in the background, large palm fronds in the foreground, okay? So, and it also, look at this, we're also creating a lot of depth right here, just inherent in the composition itself, and you're going to strengthen that with use of colors and everything that you might use in your scene, your creation of extra lighting, and so on and so forth. But if you can kind of establish a lot of those things just with the compositional elements, it really gives you a big head start in the entire process. Okay, these are some reeds. This is coming off a couple of the nature sets have them. Kind of puts a lot of life and texture into the scene. I'll stamp that one right over those fronds. Nothing wrong with kind of multiple textures right in here. You kind of created this little passage of light. You know, you've always seen it out in the water where there's that kind of rippling lighting right in here, and that opening right there kind of leaves an opportunity for lighting to come in through here. What I usually do, and what I'll do in another future videos, I see these areas like that, and what I would do is I would create shadows right at the base of it like that, okay? And I would have this thing cast a shadow right here, so you can always see it right here. Imagine it, something right in back in here, a sun or sunset or anything, with shadows being cast right in here, and you have this light coming out like that, okay? So, again, let's recap here. Foundation, main subjects, okay? Kind of that one. This one's kind of a filler, I guess. It could be a main subject matter, though, as well. Foundation, main subjects, or whatnot. Kind of your landscape structures. Foreground, okay? And there are some filler stamps in here, like that little texture and things like that. And the reeds in here could be seen as filler as well, but they're kind of more foreground, okay? So 1, 2, 3, for the most part, and then you can fill in with extra textures, okay? All right, so let's do that again. Let's go with kind of main subject or foundations. Then if it was a foundation, we'll get to our main structure. And fillers. Oh, let's do that here, okay? Let's go with that same theme I was telling you about how if I didn't have this Seaside Cove right here, you can just stamp out a scene with just your subject matter. So this one is not being stamped on top of a foundational type of element, okay? And let's see what that one might look like. All right, let's change this around a little bit. I won't go with the exact same composition, except, you know, the Seaside Cove isn't here, but let's just put this one out in the middle. Let's go, well, let's put this one right around right here. I'm going a little bit lower this time because I'm thinking about using the Palm Island stamp as kind of more of a background image, and I'll show you what that would look like. Okay, so you have this one right down here. Things that are lower usually represent something that's closer to us. Now I had those overhanging palm fronds, right? Well, those are much higher, but they represented something closer, but it's because that overhanging palm frond is supposed to be on a stalk that goes like down here, okay, kind of off the page, so it's kind of, you know, it's unseen, but it does represent something that's closer because the trunk itself would be much lower if we had a wider view of that composition. Okay, so that being said, let's move into this Palm Island again, but let's stamp it much higher than this one, relatively speaking, okay? Now, the other one I stamped it, you know, roughly on the same height. Okay, so if that is there, I'll stamp this up here, okay? Oh, it went up about maybe a ½ inch or so up, like that, from the other side. The left side of the composition, okay? So this looks closer to us, and that looks farther back, right? It doesn't look that much farther back, but it is farther back, okay? And let's do the same thing here. Let's do another impression of that. Okay, now this is a solid image for the most part. It's kind of silhouette based, right? So I want to get some of this behind this Palms and Huts Small. I'm going to mask that off right there. I'm going to mask off my huts right there. Okay, you don't need to mask off the trees though, because those are solid black, right? If they were outline designs of trees or something like that, then you would need to mask them off, but I made them solid so you don't have to think about that, okay? It's not even a consideration. It gives us plenty of space to work with, okay? So we got some other trees over here. Kind of muddled those ones up a little bit, but I was thinking, I should have made those a little bit lighter so it wouldn't get that kind of mixed in visually. But let's do something in here. Let's create some, how about some background clouds in here, okay? Alright, this is just the cloud cumulus stamp. Yeah, let's wipe off the edges right here. About a ½ inch around the perimeter, okay? Doesn't take too long. What did that take? Like a couple seconds, right? And we'll stamp some of this out. It'll be like a, I don't know, kind of a afternoon out in, where would this be? Micronesia, Tahiti, I don't know, whatever. Okay, something of this sort. Alright, so we get that nice background. What are they? They're higher up, right? So it represents something farther off in the distance, right? That's how sky usually kind of approached. And let's take a look down here. And let's say that this down here, now I could make this a very still kind of ocean side, or it could be a lagoon or something like that too. And this is like a little inlet. I don't know, in Australia, what do they call it? A billabong or something like that sort. But I could make this really still water. And what I'm getting at is if I did that, I could stamp these clouds upside down like that, like they're reflecting the imagery in the sky. Or you could go another way and utilize something like the water pattern stamp, which is something like this right in here, okay? So those water textures. Okay. So it's really whatever you want to do. It does change the spirit of the piece, you know, between kind of more of an active, windswept, I don't know if it's windswept, but there would be wind, you know, it'd be causing the ripples in the water. Or, you know, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking about, I think I like the idea of that reflection on this one. I don't know, you can use both, I guess. You can put some cloud textures down there and reflections, and also put in some water textures if you want to. Alright, so what I do is I stamp this right side up this way, okay? But when we do it down here in the water, let's just go upside down like that. Now, I don't have, you know, those huts and things like that reflecting down there. I'm not worried about that. If you're worried about that, then do a mirror impression or something, you know, do a mirrored kind of impression of that stamp that way. And I think that would be really cool, especially if you did it at nighttime or something like that, and you had like a light coming out of those windows, then you had it reflected down here in the water. But I don't know, that kind of makes for a dramatic setting right there, right? And you know, I would fill in here with some additional colors. I think I'll definitely do this one. That looks like a lot of fun in terms of establishing that I don't know, I guess it's kind of a lighting scheme. It's a kind of a dreamy looking scenario too, with the use of that strong of a mirrored reflection. That's what photographers are always going for. They always go for oh, it's usually early morning, because that's when there's less kind of wind and whatnot. You know, the water's really super still, and if there's kind of a nice kind of reflective kind of opportunity, they like to really capture that spirit. Okay, so let's add some foreground in here. Let's say that there's, you know, we're sitting on a shore on the other side of this, and we'll call it a lagoon or whatnot. I'm just stamping these leaves in here just for variation. I don't want to do every scene exactly the same, you know, from one to the next. So, just stamping in some leaf forms like this. Okay. Let's come in. It kind of puts us sitting on the shore out here, kind of enjoying the scene. I do like to put in these types of foreground elements like this, because I feel like when I'm doing that, it puts me in the scene, because it puts objects at the same distance from the viewer, okay? So these leaves would be much closer to us, okay? So instead of being, I don't know, like on a drone or something like that, going and taking a picture of this scene here or something like that, it puts me on the shoreline looking out at that scene. So, and that's one of the really fun things about scenic stamping, is they're kind of transportive in terms of kind of taking you somewhere in the span of time that it takes you to achieve the final result. Okay, you kind of go there in your subconscious. That's my theory, at least. That's why a lot of people, people find like rubber stamping in general to be very relaxing, but sometimes when you're doing scenes and settings, it really puts you into a kind of a scenario of you being at that location. And that's just from the feedback that I've received over the years from people doing that. And isn't that a great thing that we can do? You know, we can kind of escape into our crafts and whatnot. Or in the case of scenic stamping, you can escape into the craft and whatnot, get into your media and everything like that, and maybe, in the course of whatever, a half an hour or something like that, from a mental standpoint, you've gone to that place that you stamped out. Okay, let me take this off so you can see what I'm doing here. I had that solo canoeist on my table here from What set is that? Set 9 or something? Okay, this is a little canoeist, right? All right, now I have a choice here. Where do I go? Is he, you know, supposed to go down here, or is he supposed to be farther back? I think this guy is so small it doesn't really matter, but in terms of scale, I don't want to have him up here in the sky, but let's just put him right down about like so. Okay, so that kind of fits in terms of scale here. That one could go up here too, but if it was like a duck or something like that and I stamped him like up here, it would mean that the duck was probably as large as the house. Okay, so that's how you kind of decide something like that. Or just stamp it out, you know, and then take a look and compare and contrast. See if something looks kind of a little bit more appropriate to you in terms of the placement and scale of that figure. I have a completely different video on scale in rubber stamping. All right, so anyways, what do we have here? Main subject matter, okay. I guess this one would be considered filler. It's that cloud stamp used in the background right up here and in the foreground, okay, just flipped upside down. So you got 1, 2, and then 3. Foreground, okay. Main subject, filler, in this case filler is sky, you know, and then foreground again. And then I do my little, you know, little creatures and whatnot. I don't know if I would do those all the time, but since I'm just kind of stamping out my compositions, yeah, without doing any coloring in, it looks a little bare, so I am probably filling in a little bit more than sometimes I would if I was just stamping, you know, my main subject, coloring, and then filling in later, okay? So it's a little bit of a different experience for me because oftentimes I save, you know, my subject matter till the, I don't know, the last thing I do, or the foreground. All right, let's play around with something now. Let's just grab, let's make something, I don't know what would be described as maybe something very graphic or something like that. You know, let's just go for something like sky or something like that. I love just doing sky scenes, okay? Kind of more skyscapes than anything, and then if I add anything else in there, it's kind of it's more to kind of enhance the sky, where on something like this, the sky is kind of put in there to more, it's more of an embellishment of the main subject matter, okay? The sky is kind of like a secondary thing. It plays a key role in terms of the overall, but, you know, I think the main things that we'd be looking at are that little canoeist, then this, and then the clouds or something like that. But let's make this one where the sky is really kind of the big star of the scene, okay? So I won't use too much other imagery in here, but let's say that this one's going to be just a really super radiant, warm toned scene. Oh my gosh, this is a pad that is disintegrating on me. I saw chunks of it coming out. This is a 20-year-old Marvy pad. I'm starting to come across that now. I guess, I don't know, 20 years is the cutoff, maybe? I should save that pad, actually. I should see if I can kind of remove the pad, because they do sell replacement or blank pads now. And I might be able to pull that old pad off and just replace it with the new felt pad. So I can probably remove that with the, because the blank ones are just white around the edge. Alright, so much for that red. I have other reds. Let's go with, alright, this is something that I almost never do. Let's try a magenta. Is that pad okay? These are the really old cases right here. So I know these pads are really super old. They started doing just that sticker on top instead of the gold emboss. And they did that like years ago, so. Alright, so this is magenta sun, maybe I should do it on an angle like this. Let's just do it at an angle. Let's just to be, you know, a little bit different here, okay? Sometimes when you stamp things at an angle, you can stamp the entire landscape at an angle, and it'll kind of bring into the piece an inherent drama from the visual movement of something kind of being, you know, skewed at an angle like that. Sometimes I put my skies at an angle, but I'll put the landscape, you know, just registered, I don't know, whatever, traditionally or whatever, you know, completely horizontal. And I don't know, that creates its own dynamic there. And like I said, the movement of the piece is very, very different. Okay, so we have that. Let's take this cloud stamp now. Yeah, I was thinking maybe I'll do it in a different color, but I think this pad's starting to go too. But, by the way, I didn't say it in this one, but you can use whatever kind of pads you want. And I'm just doing this on glossy cardstock. You can be doing any of these compositions on a, you know, a matte cardstock if you want. Okay. All right, now I'm going to try to stamp into this, but maybe not over that. I got really close there. I almost stamped. Well, I got a little bit into that sun, but no big deal. But let's do something like this. Let's wipe off this front part. What I mean by the front part is that part that's being illuminated, because I want that sun to be illuminating my clouds right here. So I'm creating kind of a softer transition where this transitions into that hot sun image. I've never done this in this color before. I hardly ever stamp sky figures in this color. It's one of the brightest colors out there. Marvy, just in general, create very bright colors, and this is one of the brightest within that line, so it gets pretty crazy. It's really fun, though. You can run in some yellows, oranges, reds, and whatnot to create this really extremely vibrant, warm, I guess it'd be a sunset or something. I don't know. It's almost more electric than that. It's really extreme. But anyways, can you see what I'm doing here? I mentioned this on my previous video, but the illumination is coming from this way on this cloud, so when I'm stamping it over the top of it, I stamp it this way, the sides, underneath it's like this, you know, so you always kind of have it rotated in a direction of your lighting scheme. Okay, now, I don't really need to wipe it off on the perimeter like this because it's going up into the previous impressions, but see, when I was going up right next to my light source, I did wipe it off in here, but over here, you don't need to do that. With this cloud stamp right here, one of the things that I forget to mention sometimes is when I'm stamping this out, it's kind of center pressuring like this with my finger, okay? I mean, you can go like this too, but, you know, for the most part, you just want it center pressured, okay? Now, if that isn't, you know, a sky-based subject matter, I don't know what is. So in this case, what is that? That's really probably the main image in terms of the thing that's going to be dominating people's attention when they look at this piece right here. So even if I put things in the foreground, I still think that's the main subject matter, okay? So these types of things could be something that's very pushed back in the distance depending on what color is used and also what you use in the foreground. Okay, like if I use that in a light blue back in here, or orange or whatever, you know, I would think that the subject matter is still kind of dominating the scene from a focal point standpoint. But this one right here, this is, I think that this is definitely what this is about. I almost like it kind of like this right here, so I can put in some branches or something like this in here. And I would do that later on in the process if I was approaching these scenes as I normally do. I get my kind of general composition established like that. Then I do my coloring, and then I stamp my foreground on top of that. This would be a perfect opportunity for the VersaFine pigment ink. But since we're just doing compositions right here, let's go with some trees now to go in the foreground right here. I think it's time for some additional ink. Okay, this is just black dye-based ink. I added some more in here because anything that goes in front of this should be really bold, because it is a really, really loud piece. This one right here I'll finish off too in a later video, but you'll see, I mean, it looks really loud and kind of obnoxious right now, but I'll show you how you can really make this kind of more of a tranquil, but very, very brilliant and saturated background situation, okay? Hopefully, I mean, that's the theory. Okay, so, getting a good saturation with this. I'm used to holding this down because a lot of times I have a lot of inks already kind of applied on here in terms of the coloring process, so I probably don't need to hold this down quite as often, or quite as long, but I am because of, I don't know, habit and, I don't know, muscle memory or whatever, just in terms of my process. Okay, so we have that like that. Fairly dramatic, huh? We have something near and just far right there. A lot of times in the other scenes we have kind of foreground, midground, background, and sky or something like that. This is basically, you know, for the most part, 2 layers of depth. The clouds are supposed to represent something much closer to us, of course, you know, much closer, but like from a photography standpoint, the trees would be at a certain depth, and you know the clouds and sun back there would just be considered infinity in terms of your exposure. Okay, so we have that. That was the pines and rocks right there. Let's go on with my trusty pine, leafless pine right here. We have a really tall format here, and again, relatively speaking, right? But this tree right here can go clearer from the bottom of the scene to the top if I want to. But let's establish this one as the old, kind of ancient pine in the composition right here. Okay, see something like that. Isn't that fun? All right. Don't always just think in terms of what are real colors. Now, if you look at through a lot of photos of places, or you're just kind of more observant in nature, you'll find all kinds of different colors out there than you would normally think. Okay, for me, one of the greatest, I don't know, it's not really a compliment, but the observations that some people that get into scenic stamping say is, you know, they don't mention things about objects. Well, they might, but it's things like they notice clouds or skies or, you know, moons or something like that in the lighting out in nature. They're more observant because they want to incorporate those things that they see into their own pieces. So sometimes it makes them kind of more of a, I don't know, an observer of nature, you know, not just seeing something, but observing it and, you know, I guess kind of processing it and thinking about it. But you'll find all these types of colors out there. Maybe not around a moon like that. That's kind of going for the extreme and whatnot. But I don't know. What I was getting at was utilize your favorite colors if you want, you know, and don't worry about, say, would that exist out there? If you love purple or whatever, you know, and you're doing a meadow or something, make that meadow purple, you know, and make that, you know, or something like that. Whatever colors you like, just utilize them. And I don't know, I think when you do things like that, when we do things and we incorporate those kind of aesthetics that we appreciate just in general, I think you come up with a better result because you're making that kind of emotional connection with that with which you're kind of giving life to and whatnot. Okay, so let's do something else with, I'm trying to decide on what else do I want to do. I was thinking about doing a little bit more mixing and matching between sets here. I have several different sets here, and I'm going to list them in my description here. Here, let's do something like this. In nature set number 8, there's the larger Lakeside Cove, and this one's the smaller Lakeside Cove. You've probably seen this done before, but let's do it again. In the spirit of this video, let's take this small one. Okay. And in nature set number 8, I don't have the unmounted version of it, but these two come with that, okay? Now, let's talk about a little bit about scale, okay? Now, to the beginning scenic stamper, all right, or someone that's considering getting into it, okay? Most of people that buy images, okay, it's usually some kind of object or subject matter, okay? An image. And they're used to using that in its entirety, and usually there's space around it. Okay, there's like a space within a format, whatever format they're working in, the size of the card. All right, and they're just centering it. So a lot of times when you you're thinking about landscape stamping, the whole thing doesn't have to be in there, right? I mean, you certainly could. You could stamp this out like that. Happy birthday or whatever, you know. Kind of put a little bit of a color framing around it, and this would be kind of set off and framed as if it's, I don't know, just a singular statement, okay? And that's fine too. But you could, you know, if you're out in nature and you're taking photography or something like that, you're taking a photograph of a greater whole. Not that we want to make it look like something's missing, like, oh, there should have been something else out there, but let's just use this in sections, okay? Or in fragments of the existing designs, and I'll show you where that would come into play. Okay, now this is just an example right here. We can do this in many different ways, all right? But that was kind of using about half of it, right? And what is this right here? Well, it doesn't make sense just like that, right? But let's say we want to incorporate a lot of imagery in here that's going to represent a lot of depth, okay? So this is kind of an example of, this is the main imagery, all right? There's going to be two different lakeside coves right here, and then we'll use an image that's very much related to that here. I didn't. I'm going to use mostly the right side of this image, so it'll be the left side when you're looking at it upside down like that. So these are larger trees than this one, right? So where is this going to be? Higher or lower? Lower, right? Because it represents something closer to us, okay? So let's get this in here like so. You can do a couple of different impressions of it too. Like I'm thinking about right there, and I can put, let's do this one right here. Let's really utilize these ones. Okay, so it's kind of using it in a similar format to this one right here. Okay, one impression, two impressions. Okay, now where would I use that smaller lakeside cove in here? Would it be, you know, bottom half, top half? Top half, right? Because it's a much smaller design. I mean, I could merge it in with this one right here. It would just look like this cove, you know, it kind of continues on and it kind of goes around back there, but I'm going to need to put it like way up here. And I might even go for a couple impressions of it. Let me show you what I'll do on this one. Let's utilize a little bit of depth, okay? Okay, I haven't been changing colors around, but let's do it. Okay, I think you get point. If you're new to this, if you're been stamping, this is all old stuff to you. But let's say that this is going to be kind of a early morning on the lake type of thing, or a nighttime type of scene. So I'm thinking of cool tones in here, grays, gray blues, and whatnot. Okay, so I'm going to use a color out of that color scheme. I'll just go into blue here. Blue is going to be a lighter version of this image than doing it in black. Okay, I'll show you something that I do too. Just like my cloud, when I wipe some of it off, I can wipe off some of this bottom right here too. And hopefully it looks like it's a little bit more misty down here because it's not stamping out as dark. And I even have a streak in there, like the streaks in the mist or whatnot. Okay, and we'll stamp this higher up. You don't need to mask off that Lakeside Cove because that Lakeside Cove in the, I guess in the midground right here, is stamped in black, okay, and transparent inks will always show the darkest thing closest to it. Now on this one right here, I could even stamp it higher up here. Or I'll put it on the same plane, okay? Alright. Inked up. Wiped off here. This is background, but I kind of consider this more of a kind of subject matter, okay? Because they're all kind of equal in terms of subject matter and the focal point of a scene. I think someone will look down here and they'll kind of go up there like that as far as the visual path that your viewer will take. Okay, but anyways, those are done in blues, and I'll bring in some blues in here later on, okay? But I mean, that's pretty well established in terms of our composition. You don't need to do too much, but just for the sake of doing that, okay, let's utilize some other imagery so that we can go with our main image, and then let's go in with our filler, okay? Or, see, as I'm looking at this, is right next to my arm right here. Let's use this moon right here. Okay. Watch this what I do on this one. Okay. Main subject matter. Let's go with the sky right here. Let's do this in the same blue. Okay. Which will be as dark as those trees back there, right? Because I stamped them in that. But this image is made up of dots, though. It won't have as much solid as those trees right here. But just to be certain that it does stamp out a little bit lighter, again, you just kind of wipe it off down here, like so. Okay. I'll wipe it off where it goes into the trees a little bit more. I'm kind of doing it with a dry paper towel. Okay. So, see, I'm taking off that ink right out around in here. You don't want to take off all of it, of course. And, okay, don't be lazy. Let's just mask off those rocks down there, okay? And I'll take this, and where do you stamp it? Do you need to mask off the trees? No, because they're nice and dark. And what I'm stamping this in is lighter than those trees. So it's, again, the moon will not look like it's in front of the trees, okay? So there we go right there. Isn't that a great little moonrise right there for a, I think that'll create a cool setting. And that moon ended right there. I could fill in with my cloud cumulus like this. Remember, I would turn it that way where it's being illuminated by that moon. Or, let's just ink this up again on the top portion of it. I don't want two moons in the scene. We're not doing what's that scene in Star Wars where there's two moons up there and Luke Skywalker's gazing out at them? I don't know. If you know it, you can write it in the comments section. But anyways, I just took this part of this cloud and I just stamped it upside down like that, just so I can get that portion right in there, okay? I didn't want to mask this off and do it like that. It matches up perfectly well right there anyway. Okay, now if you want this, I mean, you could do something like, you know, a reflection down here, something like that, with, you know, going for that moon down here. I'm not going to do that, though. All right, so what do we have here? We have subject matter and background, sky, okay. Now let's put in a few more textures within the given area. So that would be your kind of filler. So main images, then filler. We didn't have like a visual lead-in or something like this in here, you know, like a foundation, right? It was just, it's all white down in here. So let's go with our water pattern stamp right here. All right, now, just in general, okay, here's a little bit of lighting theory. We'll get into this more when we start coloring these scenes. But if that moon is shining on the water right in here, that's going to be fairly light, okay? As we move away from that light source, it's probably going to be dark. So right in here, where that moon is, okay, in relation to these rocks, this area in here is going to be a little bit darker, right? So I am just going to utilize this water texture stamp to give me a little bit of a head start in my lighting scheme, okay? So you can see that. See what it's kind of creating a little bit of a shadow like that? All right? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be precise in terms of your analysis either, okay? Not at all. But this just gives us a little bit of a head start. Okay, now watch what I do too here. This is going to give me a full impression and version of this color of ink, right? But what if I go blot it off like that, right? And then I put that version of it in this area where it's going to be lighter because of that illumination, okay? Like that. I'm not worried about these trees or anything like that. Yeah, I'm getting some blue in some of my rocks, but who cares? Alright, so you can see the little textures on here. Yeah, there's a little bit. I think it could stand to use a little bit more. I was being very careful about that. Let's not be too careful, because this type of methodology doesn't call for, you know, being super careful. Okay, now remember, I could stamp those ripples out in black, but in theory, if there's this kind of blue color scheme in here, the colors of the shadows usually are going to be a darker version of the color that your light is casting, okay? Now I have these black shadows down here, but that's from the actual impressions of the tree. I mean, I could have colored them, you know, in blue before stamping them out too, but I didn't know what color the scheme this is going to be. I decided about that moon, you know, well, you were watching me, kind of after the fact. But anyways, here's a great foundation right here. And we have some tones already introduced in here. You notice how this is a little bit lighter right in here? Right over here, I put the ripples a little bit darker. And those ripples in here are lighter, but it looks like the light is shining on there already. And we haven't even applied any color in terms of our coloring process, but that gives us a little bit of a head start. Here's a little bit of a darker tones right down in here, so that kind of creates this little passage of light right back there. And that's really fun stuff to establish its lighting within a scene. And that's kind of the hardest thing for some people to kind of conceptualize, okay? But if you watch my video on easy scenic lighting, I don't remember what video that is. You can just look up Stampscapes easy scenic lighting and it should come up. But basically, in that very simplified concept of a lighting structure that I do in that one, it's just basically there's light up here and there's light down here somewhere. Okay, light in the sky, which would be light source, and you get reflected light down here, and then they're just kind of separated by a little bit of shadow. So in here, I'm going to make that little area in there a little bit darker, so you'll have area of light like that. And then there'll be an area of light down here. It's being broken up a little bit by all these different shapes in here and whatnot, you know, that would be casting the shadows, but an area of light and another area of light up here, okay? But watch that video, though, if you want to know about that. It's too easy, okay, in terms of, you know, your approach with lighting. But it's what I use for the most part. I do have some variations of it, but the concept of it is, it's the same, and I can show you 20 different scenes, you know, that I've done, you know, the last 20 videos of, and you'll see that same basic lighting scheme in all of them, really. It alters a little bit, you know, sometimes if I'm working on 11 by 17, you know, you have more areas of light perhaps or whatnot. But anyways, look at that little subject matter down there. Is that kind of fun? This one could have been stamped up here. If I stamped it up here, it means that this little aisle or whatever, the trees are much smaller. If I stamp them down here, it means they're a little bit taller in terms of the relation to the figure. But anyways, what do we have here? We have some more scenes going with their kind of crazy color schemes and whatnot. This one will be really fun to color in. But anyways, here are... I thought I did more than that, boy. Or did I do... Oh, here we go. I knew I had to do more than that. Here's 4 more scenes, okay? Foundations, filler, background, and sky, okay? Now, let's say I did my sky first on this one right here, okay? All that, the clouds and lighting. If I stamp this image over this, what would happen in this? All that cloud structure and textures would show up right in those huts, right? If I stamp that out right in there, you understand that? But it doesn't matter if I stamp kind of hard silhouettes on top of this, because those cover up everything in there. But if I have an open design, you know, like these huts or something like that, whatever's in the background will show through. That's why I stamp these images in here first, and I work everything around it that are surrounding it, okay? Now in this one right here, I stamp my foundation first, but there was nothing back here. This is like white paper, so I could do this one second. But if I'm going to do, you know, that sun or something like that, and if I want in the background, all I have to do is just to take a little paper towel like that and mask off that open area, right? But you can stamp it right on over your solid dark images, okay? So I can do whatever with the cloud of sun or cloud cumulus or anything back there. I would just need to mask off this portion if I'm going to stamp it in here. You don't have to mask off any of that, though, because it's just solid black. Okay, so anyways, another grouping of 4 here. I'll stop at that. Those are the concepts and the process that I go with. I have some really busy scenes right here, and they're a little, like I said, they're a little bit busier than I probably normally do, but since I'm not doing any of the coloring and I'm just working out the entire composition from start to finish, and all I have to do is coloring on there, I'm probably filling in a little bit more than I normally would, which is a good thing to do. You know, it's a good way to work, change things up every now and then and see what you get from your slight tweak in your process. I'm looking at this scene right here. I was thinking about making this a little bit more dramatic, maybe. Okay, I mean, I could color these in right here and then add these later still, but just in the spirit of this grouping of videos that I'm doing on compositions, let's just stamp out, you know, let's stamp out most of what we're going to be putting in here, okay? I still might reserve the right to go in and, add a couple other images in there later on. But for the most part, let's get all of the stamping portion of it done, just to give people kind of a stronger idea of kind of what the end result will look like in terms of our compositions, okay, and imagery used. Okay, so those are some birds kind of flying across there. It kind of makes for a kind of a dramatic, I don't know, kind of scenario like that when you put things in front of your light sources, within your pieces. But anyways, okay. Play around with your compositions. You can do some, I call these stamp sketches, but they're kind of a little bit beyond that because I do plan on going in here and coloring. But again, it's a good way to get to know your images as well. Play around with things, stamp them out in different, different compositional ways. Use portions of them instead of the whole thing all the time. Repeat your designs. Stamp them sometimes a little bit lower, a little bit higher to represent distance. Okay, these are, I think this one right here, this Palm Island, is actually in front of that one. It looks like it's a little bit closer, but if I stamp this up, a half an inch higher in relation to that one, then it looks like it's farther back in the distance, right? So those are all those little tweaks you can do. You don't have to think about it either. It could come about by accident or whatever. You can just place it around, and just kind of, I don't know, go off of instinct, or just, if you're experimenting, don't kind of hyper-analyze anything, and just kind of get the feel of a blending of your imagery and whatnot too. But again, you can kind of fall back on the general concept of this video. You're kind of going with your subject matter. Sometimes the subject matter is, a secondary thought. Sometimes it's the first one, okay? Main subject matter, filler imagery, and then foreground, okay? And there's all kinds of variations that happen, within that kind of structuring, You might do it the complete opposite, and that can be done in this type of stamping. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, as always, drop me a note in the comment section. If you like this video, hope you like, share, and subscribe.